If God created everything, who created God? The question that is answered over and over again, but never loses its popularity. In fact, the answer is so simple that at the end of the video, you will say that I had such a simple answer. But before that, there is a very important point that Muslims are missing. Let's talk about it together. Since an atheist has not yet accepted Allah, it is illogical for him to ask who created Allah, whom he normally does not accept, because he has not accepted that being yet. Therefore, an atheist must first accept the existence of a transmaterial power, and then we should talk about how that power came into existence. In other words, the existence of Allah, who created matter out of nothing, created it with wisdom, and controlled it in order with his knowledge, should be explained by proving that matter is simple, unconscious, self-created, and incapable of giving order to the universe. In other words, the helplessness of the atom should be shown, and a transmaterial power should first be explained through the atom. If he accepts this, then how did that power, Allah, come into existence? Did someone create him too? No, I'm definitely not implying that. I seek God's forgiveness. Or one can always ask questions like, how can there be a creator? Otherwise, it is a self-contradictory question to ask who created God, whom he does not even believe exists. The maker and the made are of different nature. It is a serious mistake to think of them as one and the same, and to ask the same kind of questions of both. For example, can we illustrate it like this? Joseph wrote this book, and who wrote Joseph? An architect built the building you see, but who built the architect? A programmer coded this computer game, but who coded that programmer? It was very illogical to think of the doer and the done as the same structure, and to ask them both the same verb form. That is the point. Just because a book is written with a pen does not mean that a human being is written with a pen. Just because a building is built, the architect is not built, or because a software is programmed with codes. The software developer is not programmed with those codes if their structures are different. They should be evaluated separately. Allah created the universe. It is the same mistake to say who created Allah. We think of Allah and the universe as the same being. However, while Allah is an infinite being who is deigned from matter, deigned from time, and created matter out of nothing, the universe is a mortal being that was created afterwards in a material structure. Naturally, Allah created the universe. So it is a contradiction to ask who created Allah with the same structure. In other words, it would be a mistake to think of the universe in terms of the act of creation, and the creation in terms of the act of creation. After all, it is only Allah who creates out of nothing, sets all the rules and governs besides. Does Allah consist of atoms so that we can liken him to the formation of atoms? Just as it is illogical to say who wrote the author, who built the architect, who programmed the programmer, so it is illogical to say who created God. There is another contradiction that makes this question illogical. That is the contradiction of the infinite loop. What does this mean? For example, if you had to get permission from somebody to watch this video, and the person you got permission from had to get permission from somebody else, and that person had to get permission from somebody else, and so on forever, would you ever click on this video and watch it? Of course not, because there is the contradiction of infinite loop. If it's in that infinite loop, then there will never be any permission. But if we think in reverse, if you have watched this video, we automatically say, well, there is no such infinite loop contradiction, because now you have pressed the button and watched the video. So there is such an infinite loop contradiction in this question. There is a contradiction of necessary dependence that goes on forever. Who created God? Who created him? Who created the one who created him? So if there was another power on which Allah depended to create the universe, and if there was another power on which that power depended, and if this went on forever, this universe could never have been created, because the cycle does not end, just like the contradiction of your permission to watch this video. But if this universe was created and we came into existence, then we say that there is never an infinite cycle of creators. There has to be one single being, Allah, who is eternal, eternally existent, and not in need of anything, naturally. Asking who created him is a contradictory, illogical and impossible question. If there is no time, there is no before. In fact, when we think about the concepts of time and timelessness, the logic of the event becomes very easy and simple, because concepts such as priority and posteriority are time-dependent concepts, concepts that are in time. Think about it. Can there be first where there is no time? Of course not, because there is already no time. Think about the engineer who invented the phone in your hand. This leads to three different conclusions. 1. The maker of the phone is before him. 2. The phone is one thing, the engineer is another. 3. The rules inside the phone do not apply to the maker. For example, let's consider the key lock rule. Does the key lock rule apply to the engineer who made it? Of course not. If the keys are locked, does that mean the person making the phone is also locked? No, it doesn't, because the rule in it is that God is also the creator of the universe, matter and time. This leads to three different necessary conclusions. God is not like matter. The rules of the universe do not apply to God. He is the one who made the rule in the first place. The rule of time is also a rule of the universe. There is no time for God. It is invalid if there is no time. There is eternity. There is no such thing as before. God created time later and placed it in the universe like a rule. Naturally, he does not get stuck in the rule of time that he created. Time does not apply to him. It is illogical and contradictory to ask who created time where there is no time. Because there is no time, and if there is no time, there is no before. The eternal already exists. In fact, if we know two important words, the matter will be solved. And the property of existence is divided into two, essential and accidental. Allah's existence is not an acquired property for him. So let us ask how he came into existence, who brought him into existence. To exist forever is its own characteristic. All other things outside of God have come into existence because God has created them afterwards. In other words, the existence of the universe, the existence of atoms, their existence is accidental afterwards. Some of you may say, "Brother, I'm speaking too terminologically. Make it a little simpler." We can actually give an example like this. You go outside and it is raining. Your whole body, your clothes are wet. So I'm asking you a question. Who got your clothes wet? The rain. Does it make sense to ask who made the rain wet? Of course not. Rain is the source here. It gets wet. It doesn't get wet. Wetting a place or your clothes is incidental. That is, it happens afterwards. But the wetness of rain is essential. That is, it is from itself. You say the wetness of water is its own property. That is why the rain does not get wet. It does not receive outside influence. So also Allah's existence is from himself. Allah creates. He is not created. Or let's think about the sun and its reflection on water. If we ask what is the source of the reflection, the answer is the sun. So when we say what is the source of the reflection in the sun, we say that we have already reached the main source. Or let's imagine we are studying the movement of train cars when I ask who is pulling the last car. You point to the one in front of it. When I ask who is pulling it, you point to the one in front of it. And when I reach the end, we see that it is the locomotive, which is a different power of movement that actually pulls all the wagons. It would no longer make sense to say which wagon is in front of the locomotive and who is pulling it, because the structure of the locomotive is not like the structure of the wagons. It has a power source in itself. In fact, the locomotive is pulling all the wagons with a power of its own. We understand this. The examples of the wagons here represent the incidental nature of the movement, while the locomotive represents its essentiality, that is, It's being itself. The universe also needs Allah to come into existence, but Allah does not need anyone to exist. His existence and power is personal, that is, from himself. Naturally, it is logical to ask who created the universe, who brought it into existence, but it is illogical to ask who created Allah, the main source that brought everything into existence. Just as water does not get wet, and there is no wagon pulling a locomotive, God creates and is not created. He does not need a source to exist. Actually, there is another contradiction in this question, asking about the person in front of the first one. For example, we see a king moving an entire army with a single command. Then someone comes along and asks a question like this. This army takes its orders from the king. But from whom does the Sultan take orders? That's a very illogical question, isn't it? The king is the main source here. He is the last point. There is nothing beyond the last point. Therefore, he is already the king. The source of all movement is that king, or in a big mosque, we see the whole congregation moving with the movement of an imam. Someone asks a question like this. The whole congregation follows an imam, but who does the imam follow? Again, an illogical question, because the imam is the name of the end point here, and Allah is the creator of the universe, and the main source of the whole universe, and its movement, everything depends on him. The universe came into existence out of nothing, because he said so, and he is the main source of everything. Naturally, just as it is illogical to ask who the imam obeys, who the king takes orders from, so it is illogical to ask who created Allah. There cannot be a contestant who comes before the winner of a contest, or there is no page before the first page of a book, while Allah is the main source of everything. So it is just as illogical to ask another source as to who created him. It is a definitional error. When we look in an encyclopedia, what does the word elder brother mean? An older brother is someone who is older than you. We see this kind of definition, right? What would you say if I asked you how many years younger your older brother is than you? That would be an erroneous and absurd question, wouldn't it? Because there is a definitional error here. God is the infinite and all-powerful, the eternal, the unjust, the unjustified, the one who is not in need of anything. Naturally, the question of who created God would be contrary to his definitions. So this question is a bit like asking how many years younger your brother is than you. So there is a big contradiction. In the mind of the person asking this question, the definition of an elder brother is completely wrong. The main characteristic of being an elder brother is to already be older in age. Therefore, it is unthinkable for an elder brother to be younger than his brother. In the same way, the most fundamental characteristic of Allah is that he is not created. He has no predecessors. He is the ultimate, infinite power. So to say who created Allah is to say who created the uncreated. This is a great contradiction. There is another very important point that we have not realized. Obviously, there is a great trick of Satan here. Like what? I sometimes find it difficult to understand this. How can an atheist say that it is inconceivable to me that God is infinite, that nobody created him, and yet find it logical that the universe came into existence out of nothing, without anybody? How can the idea that God has always existed, that he is infinite, be illogical, but the idea that the universe and matter are infinite and have existed since eternity is logical? Sometimes the devil can lead people away from Islam with such deceptions that they only realize it when they die. In other words, the one who refuses to accept the infinity of Allah by saying that he cannot wrap his mind around it, accepts the infinity of matter very easily. Also, not knowing the answer to a question does not require the denial of the truth. While the proofs of Allah's existence and Islam are endless, there is no need to leave the religion, because we cannot understand Allah's timelessness, since we already live in a sea of time. It is normal that we cannot understand the concept of timelessness, and even if one has many more questions like this one, none of them should lead one away from Islam, which has thousands of evidences. God bless you, dear friends.